All right, so today I wanted to cover a few topics. One of them is basically libraries, Ruby gems and NPM. One more time, just to kind of review that. And then I wanted to talk a little bit more about debugging your code within Ruby and then within JavaScript as well. And then that should take us for all of today. All right.
Should I turn the mute on?
If you want to. It's up to you. I'll be done not too long from now. All right, so first thing I want to talk about is Ruby gems. Ruby gems is basically an online repository, like an online library, a phone book, you can imagine it, of libraries written in Ruby. And what is a library in a specific language? What does that mean? Go ahead, John.
It's like a built-in set of methods, or sort of like the default. Like, for example, Ruby, if we look in the documentation, all those things that we can call and arrays and things like that that are pre-built.
Yeah.
Or like it's like a library, like a core library or whatever.
Yeah, that's it. That's pretty much it. Yeah, basically, libraries contain a bunch of code. You can just think of it. Libraries contain a bunch of code that someone's written for you. Now, there are many things that you're going to do on a daily basis that some of those libraries are built into Ruby. Like all of your array methods are built in. All of your hash methods are built in. But there are some things that people realize, I will probably continue to need this over time. So that's where people start writing their own custom libraries. In Ruby, they're called Ruby gems. In JavaScript, they're called Node Package Manager, NPM. So there are many, many gems, and you can kind of just see a list. They're sorted alphabetically, and you can more or less see how many people have downloaded it, and then like how reputable it is. The ones I want you to focus on the most, and obviously there's a huge number of of different libraries that are out there. The main one I want you to be aware of is one that starts with a P. Let's see if Pry is on here. I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna look here. Pry. So Pry is a library that's been downloaded 51 million times. You can take a look at all of the source code and how to use it over here where it says source code. Most of these things are hosted on GitHub. So it says it's an IRB alternative and runtime developer console. So you have the ability to run all of your IRB stuff through Pry, but you also have the ability to load in files as well. This Pry is especially useful for debugging things. So again, you can use it just like you would for IRB of like 1 plus 2 and like A equals hello or something like that. You can use it just like IRB. So instead I can do gem install Pry to install this library on my machine. And I use Pry just to open it up. It looks a little bit different than IRB, but it executes the same way. 1 plus 2 is 3. A equals hello. A plus there is hello there. It's an interactive Ruby console just for you. But let's say that I wanted to start debugging my code, which is a great idea. So I've seen a lot of people do things with a bunch of put statements or console logs of like, oh, are we, like when the other day when we were doing the credit card check, and we were just like puts and console logging everything just to make sure we were getting the right thing. There's another alternative to that right now. So all I have to do at the top of the file is to require Pry. This require basically brings in the specific gem that corresponds with the arguments between the single quotes. So require Pry will basically bring in the Pry gem into this file, so I have the ability to use it within this file. And if I wanted to stop the code at one specific point, all I have to do is type in binding.pry. Binding.pry is the command to basically stop the code from executing any further. It goes through everything and then it stops at that point. And let's kind of see this in action. So John was interested about what happens with this line 11 right here. So when I do puts binary search, I have 6 and then a test array like how does it know not to like continuously add things? I'm going to put a binding pry here, and then I'm going to put a binding pry pretty much everywhere else. I have many different stopping points in my code at this point. I just want to see, like, I want to evaluate what's happening at every single level of the code.
Wait, so so it stops and then it keeps going?
It stops completely until you tell it to keep going. We'll see that right now. So I'm going to run Ruby binary search spec.rb, and you can kind of see, it's a, oh, you guys can see it pretty well. It stops right here. So the first time through, it runs through the code. It goes array.sort, it has midpoint, and it stops right here on line 24. And now I can evaluate everything around me. I can look at what item, like what am I looking for? I'm looking for the number 6. What does my array look like? What's my last index? What's my midpoint index? Because it was executed on line 23 and I stopped on line 24. And then if you're wondering, like, which if block am I going to enter next? So it's kind of like, let's see, I can either like highlight it and kind of see what's going on here. So I see that this is not going to happen. So maybe this will happen instead. Also false. Or I can put a bunch of binding pries like I did here. And the way that I continue executing the code is I'm going to type in the word exit. Exit will get me out of this particular stopping point. So when I hit exit,
to get those false returns, you just highlight it.
Yeah, so the good part about iTerm, which is why I like it, is I highlight this, I'm not doing anything, and it automatically copies. I can just do paste. So I just highlight it. Yeah. It just saves you 2 extra keystrokes. Okay, so it appears that, let's take a look at what item is, what's array, and what's last index. It appears that this is the case. So what is array at midpoint index? It's the number 3, because that's the middle. Is that, if it's less than the item, if it's less than 6, then I'm going to return binary search with like a smaller subset. So I'm here with item. I'm only worried about the second half of 3, 4, 5. And then this is where the cutoff point is. I'm shrinking it down, but I'm at, like, I keep track of where I started every single time. If I exit again, it runs through. We can see that my item is 6. My array is slightly smaller at 3, 4, 5. Last index now becomes 2 because it keeps track of how far how many times I've cut. If I exit again, it hits the bottom portion. If I take a look at midpoint index, 4 is less than the item of 6, so on and so forth. You kind of get the idea as we continue on. So I'm going to exit one more time, exit, exit, and then this time it should hit the array length of -1. So I have an item here, I have an array, there's only 5. So again, that thing we were talking about a little bit earlier, if the number is, at one point you're only going to end up with 1 thing left in your array. If it's not going to be equal, then it's not in there at all. So at this point, it returns -1, and then we exit out. There are many more interesting and useful gems that you're going to use. Faker is going to be another one, kind of that thing I showed you the other day. If you want a bunch of fake data, if you want like users to test out your stuff, but you don't want to show like people's real social security numbers or birthdays or something like that, Faker is a gem that does it for you. So Faker, you can, if you want to get like fake addresses or something on there, all you have to do is do faker address.city after you do gem install Faker, and then you can just bring all of that kind of stuff inside of your app as well. Obviously, my favorite one is Faker Hipster, where it's, if you want a bunch of hipster things on your website as like dummy data or something like that, you can just do Faker Hipster sentence, and then it'll print out a bunch of hipster phrases and things of that nature. So again, there are thousands of Ruby gems out there, and some of them will be more useful than others. The corresponding counterpart is NPM. NPM looks slightly nicer than Ruby gems because there's more JavaScript developers than there are Ruby developers. But NPM stands for Node Package Manager. A package is the same. A node package is the same thing as a Ruby gem. They're both libraries, meaning thousands of lines of code someone's written ahead of time to make your life developing things easier. You may have heard of some of these libraries. We got like React.js that we're going to learn in about 10 weeks. It was written by Facebook and is like one of like it's like the biggest and most modern front-end framework that's written in JavaScript. Like at the core of it is just JavaScript code, but someone made it ahead of time so that you can develop things easier. Ruby on Rails is actually technically a gem. It's all written in Ruby, but it's millions of lines of code that someone's written in the Ruby language to make developing apps easier.
They both do the same thing with the functions.
Yes. Well, for now, yes. For now, I'll just say yes. Let's say that you wanted to do something make your site a little bit more fun. If anyone has ever written CSS, it is the worst thing in the world. But someone's written an animate.css library for you. All I have to do is select one of these things. Like, obviously you're going to have to figure out like more of the configuration. How do I actually get this inside of my app? But in case you ever wanted to have your thing pulse or rubber band like this, could you imagine how long it would take you to write that CSS code yourself? It takes forever. Like, or if you want to do a swing like that, good luck. It's going to take you like hundreds of hours, but someone's done it for you. You know, someone has spent those hundreds of hours and said, I want everyone to have access to this. That's the idea behind open source software and why this community is a little bit more hippie-ish. It's like, I want to share the best things with everyone. So it's like, I want to write it once, and I want other people to help me out with it so that we can make great-looking things together, or wobble, something like that.
So with like a regular CSS code,
You'd actually have to move it across the screen, move it across the screen, move it across the screen, and it's fixed there. But right now, I don't know how to use animate.css, but I can't imagine it being, the learning curve is far smaller than trying to write this all out on your own. If you wanted to run off, run. So another one is called 3.js. Someone literally wrote all the code necessary for this to happen. You know, imagine writing this on I don't know when you would ever use this on your own website or something like that, but I'm just saying that you can, like, you might, if you work for Toyota or something and you want to show off like your engine moving in a certain way, this would probably be like a decent thing. Somebody wrote this all in JavaScript. You know, like somebody, like this is actually a thing. Or if you want to grab the camera, if you want like visual representations of data, or this kind of looks like coding or hacking in movies or something like that.
It's like a CIA.
Someone wrote this so that you don't have to. That's the idea behind like libraries and gems and stuff like that. It's useful things that you might need that you probably don't need to. You don't need to worry about that anymore. It's also using a lot of power, so it's killing my computer.
So the idea is that we're going to learn how to go through those documentation, pull that code, and integrate it into our own code base.
Yeah, there is very little that. So in terms of actually writing web applications, there are so many great open source libraries out there that oftentimes it's just plug and play. Like someone's written part XYZ, so I'm just going to grab it and put it inside my app.
We don't have to learn anything anymore. Is that what we're saying? So
there are good parts and bad parts to the code, right? Yes, you can get your app off the ground very quickly. Like I can create a CRUD app in 10 seconds because there's someone who wrote that code for me. They're like, you probably need like a CRUD app is one that you can create, read, update, and destroy things. It's as easy as just doing like Rails generate scaffold something, and then from the command line, and then it's done. The entire app is written for you.
Can you give me an example?
That's a great question. So the answer to that is everything is a CRUD app. Name one website that's not a CRUD app where you can't create, read, update, and destroy things. Twitter, I can create a tweet, edit a tweet, read a tweet, update, and destroy. Facebook, same thing with statuses, same thing with photos. Instagram, I can do the same thing with pictures. Amazon, I can add products to my cart. I can modify those things in my cart. I can delete them. I can see what they are. Almost everything is a CRUD app. Obviously, not everything is a CRUD app, but almost everything that you may need is going to be a CRUD app of some sort. When you were trading, a trade can be created, read, updated, and destroyed. I don't know if that's actually true, but let's pretend that it is.
You can't destroy trades.
But
I get the point.
Yeah, you get the idea. It's more or less most of the modern web is the same thing. Okay, so this is what we have for today. Let's kind of take a look together. Today is a pairing optional day, meaning you don't have to pair program with someone. Welcome, Mickey. If somebody wants to work with Mickey, just to make sure that, to welcome him in and make sure that he's all caught up, that'd be appreciated. But we don't have a ton of work for today because these are a little bit more challenging. So we have 4 challenges for class today. Caesar Cipher is going to be in JavaScript or Ruby. Choose the language that makes more sense to you, and then transfer over and just translate it into the other language afterwards. These 2. And then the final one is called bubble sort. And again, this morning we covered debugging, how to use pry. The equivalent of pry inside of JavaScript is debugger. So all you have to do, it's built in already, yeah. So if I wanted to do like function say hello, and if I did debugger here, and then console log. I ran this and I just ran say hello, you can kind of see that I stopped. Like debugger is built into Chrome and most modern web browsers. It stops right here, so I can kind of like hover over something and kind of see like what the value of it, and you can kind of see all your variables and things like that down here as well. So pry and debugger are functionally the same thing. So we covered Ruby gems. We took a look at a few JavaScript libraries. Just know that if you're saying, I wish there was something that did X, Y, Z, it probably already exists. And you can Google for it, or you can ask me. I know most of the ones that you're going to want to use anyway.
So libraries are different than frameworks, right?
Libraries are different from frameworks. Yes and no. So a framework, all frameworks are libraries, not all libraries are frameworks. Yeah, so all frameworks are libraries, meaning it's thousands of lines of code that someone wrote in that particular language. So kind of like pry will help me break into my code at a certain point, but it won't let me do anything else. Like a framework is basically like I can do Rails new, like some project, and then it will basically create a project for me. Yeah. Let me come up with a better answer. But basically, frameworks allow you to build web applications, and libraries can just make your life a little bit easier. Like, yeah.
Are we even touching on frameworks?
Frameworks is in the second half of this course. So weeks 1 through 6, again, just so people are aware, weeks 1 through 6, where people are kind of wondering, like, you might get to the point pretty soon where, like, why are we still doing this, like, ridiculous stuff? It's because we need to build that baseline of, like, understanding of how Ruby works and the gems and how to use debugger and stuff like that. And the second half, weeks 7 through 12, are all frameworks. So we're going to be building stuff every single day. But we do need to build that baseline first, because jumping in right now would be incredibly difficult. To give you an example, right now we're dealing with one or two files in Rails. When you run Rails new, which is the command to create a new Rails project, there's 56 folders.
Folders?
Yeah. No, 56 files and like 14 folders. So it's kind of like you have to know how all of those things work before we can actually get there. Otherwise, it just is too overwhelming right now.
Is there anything like pry for JavaScript where you can operate on it in the terminal or like in the shell.
Not that I have found.
So you just pop over the console.
Yeah, because
And,
JavaScript is a front-end library, meaning that it executes here on the screen or on your phone or something like that. Whereas Ruby is a back-end language, meaning you do a lot of stuff inside the command line here in this weird black box of
If you
stuff.
just type Node, can you mess around
You
with
could,
stuff?
yeah.
But it won't. It doesn't do the same thing.
It doesn't. It
Functionality.
doesn't have that same functionality. I have not found a tool that allows me to like go inside and alter things like pride like this.
Okay.
So,
Makes sense. Thanks.
sound good? All right. All right. No more talking from me today. So it's all on you. We got those
Have you taken off?
those two challenges, and then we'll get started.